In the richest zip codes, a kid can drown in privilege and no one hears the splash. Morning light spilled over the rolling lawns of the Montgomery estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. Hedges clipped like sculpture, a driveway curling past a 10-car garage, fountains that never stopped performing even when no one watched. Inside, sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of a dining room long enough to host a state dinner. Silverware gleamed. Crystal caught the light. Everything looked like money rehearsing. Caleb Montgomery, 17, pushed a fork through perfect eggs Benedict made by a chef who'd once run a 3-star kitchen in Paris. The hollandaise was silken, the English muffin crisp to the millisecond. Caleb tasted none of it. Beyond the infinity pool sat his midnight blue sports car from last year's Sweet 16. He couldn't name the model and didn't care to. It was another prop in a life that felt directed by someone else. At the head of the table, his father, Harrison Montgomery, tech tycoon, magazine cover, scanned a tablet. He didn't need to look at Caleb to make his point. His disapproval filled the room like central air. Northwood Prep called again, Harrison said, voice smooth and cold. Another F, this time in U.S. history. How do you fail the story of your own country when your family helped build its infrastructure? Caleb shrugged. It's boring. Boring, Harrison repeated, finally lifting those steel-gray eyes. Your great-great-grandfather laid rails across the Midwest. Your grandfather rode out the Depression and rebuilt in steel. I turned a garage startup into a global platform. Our story is the story of American grit. And you're bored. It's your story, Dad, not mine. Then what is yours? Harrison leaned in. What are you for besides wasting other people's effort? You've burned through 3 tutors this semester. Not because you can't learn, because you won't. Caleb stared at the window, at the pool, at the glass that divided him from a life he didn't recognize. Why try? The script was written. He'd inherit. He'd sit on boards. High school felt like a waiting room with better snacks. I don't need school, he muttered. I'll hire people who did. Harrison set the tablet down and stood. Tie perfect, posture knife straight. That is the saddest sentence I've ever heard. I'm flying to Tokyo. I return Thursday. Try not to burn the house down with apathy. He left without looking back. Silence pressed in harder than any argument. Caleb's breakfast cooled untouched. He sat in a palace and felt the stone of a prison. Northwood Prep's crest stared at him from every surface. Golden eagle clutching a book. He drifted through its marble halls like a ghost with a last name. Admissions hadn't required an interview, just the ribbon cutting on a Montgomery science wing. Kids whispered legacy and trust fund when he passed. He gave them nothing but a smirk and his phone screen. In physics, Mr. Gable talked about nebulae and fusion with the kind of passion you couldn't fake. Caleb watched a cat video. When a pop quiz landed on his desk, he scrawled a $sign and handed it in. Gable looked at him like a doctor looking at a patient who won't quit smoking. No words left to try. The counselor, Mrs. Albright, soft voice, tired eyes, always faintly smelling of peppermint tea, held up his file, thick with red flags. Your GPA's below graduation minimum, Caleb. You're bottom 1% of the class. Statistics are for people who have to care, he said, leaning back until his chair creaked. What do you respect? She asked, gentle. And for a moment, it wasn't a school meeting. It was a human question. He opened his mouth for the usual snark, then closed it. Nothing came. He respected nothing. He was an echo with a black card. He ditched the rest of the day and parked by the Long Island Sound. Gray water slapped gray rocks. Each wave rose with purpose and died into foam. Potential collapsing into nothing. That felt familiar. The house was quiet when he wandered back at dusk. Staff moved like well-trained shadows. He ended up in the two-story library. Leather spines, rolling ladder, a fireplace big enough to warm a basketball team. Books by the foot lined the walls. More decor than substance. Something hummed softly from a corner by the hearth. There, sitting cross-legged on the polished floor, was a girl. Maybe 11. Hair pulled into a simple ponytail. A bucket and rag next to her. A stack of well-worn paperbacks from the public library at her knee. She was supposed to be cleaning the baseboards, but her gaze was anchored to an open book propped against a chair leg. Caleb knew her only by orbit. The housekeeper, Susan Thompson, sometimes brought her daughter after school to keep her safe and quiet while she finished shifts. The kid, he didn't remember her name, had always been invisible. He stepped closer, expecting a fairy tale or a middle-grade novel. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Caleb froze. That text had flattened him in philosophy class. He'd bailed 2 pages in and Venmo'd a senior for a summary. And here was the housekeeper's kid, sunk into the words like they were warm water. She must have felt him there because she looked up. Her eyes were a clear, steady blue. Not impressed, not scared, just present. "Hey," she said, small voice, sure tone. "What are you reading?" he asked, though he'd read the title twice. "A book," she said, lifting it. "About how to be decent when life isn't." No swagger would come. The line he would have thrown, some jab about pretentious choices, died in his throat. He who had everything was bored. She, who had so little, was studying how to live well. "Isn't that a bit advanced?" he tried, hearing his own condescension. "Words are just words," she said. "Ideas don't check ID." A beat. "My great-granddad used to say most people wait until they're old to get wise, and by then they're too tired to use it." Caleb glanced from her eyes to the ancient Roman on the page and felt something open under his feet. At Northwood, he was the one with tutors and wings named after his family. Here, in his own library, he was not the smartest person in the room. "What's your name?" he asked. "Clara," she said, and returned to the page, leaving Caleb standing there with a feeling he couldn't name. The boy who couldn't care just met a girl with a secret way of seeing, and she's about to change everything. Hook first. When a golden cage finally locks, even a prince learns what a door feels like. Harrison landed from Tokyo in a mood that changed the barometric pressure of the house. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask about school. He dropped a thick manila envelope on the coffee table in the home theater and looked at his son like a board meeting gone bad. "Northwood," he said, "a complete report, grades, attendance, conduct." He reached into his jacket and set 3 items beside it. Caleb's phone, his black leather wallet heavy with cards, and the key fob to the midnight blue coupe. The keys hit glass with a bright, cruel clink. "What is this?" Caleb asked, a tightness rising in his chest. "This is the end of autopilot. No phone, no funds, no car. All privileges are earned. You've earned none." "You can't do that. How am I supposed to get to school?" The school bus stops at the end of the drive at 6:45 a.m. Harrison's eyes were shards of ice. Thousands of kids manage it. You'll be one of them. The bus? The word landed like a dare. A Montgomery on the Big Yellow? Social suicide. Let them look, Harrison said. Maybe visibility will do what private chefs and private tutors couldn't. He turned and left. The room shrank around Caleb and the silent, useless key fob. Before dawn, he pulled on the plainest hoodie he owned and walked the long, winding drive to the road. The air had that Connecticut bite, damp and sharp. When the bus doors folded open, conversations dipped. 100 eyes took inventory. He kept his head down and slid into a cracked vinyl seat in the back. Diesel and old gum. 20 minutes of not belonging. Northwood was worse. In the cafeteria, Kyle Jennings rose on cue, voice pitched for maximum audience. Look alive, people. Greenwich royalty took public transit. Did your driver call in sick, Monty? Laughter skittered across tile. Caleb clenched his jaw and walked past. He didn't have the phone to disappear into, or the car to outrun this. He had to stand there and feel it. It burned. Nights stretched long without screens and engine noise. The house, stripped of distractions, became a museum of echoes. In the kitchen, one evening, he paused in the doorway. Susan Thompson polished silver with efficient, quiet movements. Worry lived in the lines around her eyes. Beside her, Clara worked a tarnished fork with a soft cloth, holding it up to the light like a jeweler. "Why do some spots go darker?" she asked. "It's just tarnish, honey," Susan said, not looking up. "Air does that to silver." "But it's worse in the carved places," Clara said, peering at the pattern. "The air lingers longer where it's hard to reach. It's like a grudge. If you don't clean the small, hidden places, that's where the bitterness settles." Caleb stood there, weirdly winded by the simple truth of it. He'd stared at 1,000 pieces of silver and only seen forks. Later, in the library, he found her sketching in a little notebook, feet tucked under her on the hearth rug. "Hey," he said. "Hey, Caleb," she answered, not surprised. "That thing you said, about seeing." The words felt heavy, important. "I think I'm blind. I look at everything and it's just nothing. I'm failing at school and at life. I don't know how to care." The confession scraped out raw. He hadn't said anything that honest in years. She studied his face like a field medic deciding if the patient could be saved. Susan appeared in the aisle, dust cloth in hand, protective instinct flashing. Clara gave her mother the smallest don't worry nod, and Susan retreated, hovering within earshot. "My great-granddad was a scout in the war," Clara said quietly. "He walked alone into places nobody wanted to go and came back with the story everyone needed. Most people live on the surface. He taught me to read underneath." "Can you teach me?" "I can show you," she said after a long breath. "It's harder than any test you've ever failed. There are rules." "Anything," Caleb said. "Name it." "First, you start at zero. Everything you know about school, your dad, yourself, drop it. It's noise. Second, you do exactly what I say. Even if it feels dumb, there's a reason. Third," she said, and her voice turned older than 11, "you throw your pride away. It's heavy and useless. It's the wall between you and the world." Caleb swallowed. "Okay. Tomorrow, dawn, oak tree in the south lawn. Don't be late." He set his alarm on an ancient analog clock he dug out of a guest room drawer. At 5:40 a.m., the house was a different planet. Quiet, honest. Mist clung low over the grass. The old white oak rose out of the lawn like something from a postcard. Clara stood by it in overalls and a windbreaker, holding an empty glass jar. She pointed to the ground at the tree's base. "What do you see?" "Grass And dirt, he said flatly. Look again, she said. Don't glance. Observe. He crouched, irritated, then caught a flicker. A line of ants hauling a crumb 3 times the size of the lead ant, detouring around a pebble, disappearing into a seam in the earth. A spider web, strung between 2 blades, jeweled with dew, perfect and doomed to the first fat sunbeam. A tiny purple wildflower, forcing itself through a crack in hard soil. Veins in a fallen leaf like a map. Moss, hugging bark, where the sun never reached. He'd walked past this tree 100 mornings and seen lawn. Now a small, noisy universe lay under his nose. He looked up. Clara was smiling, not smug, proud, like a coach watching a first solid free throw. The world's whispering all the time, she said. You just learned to be quiet enough to hear it. She twisted the jar lid and held it out. Lesson 2. What's the jar for? Pressure, she said. Kitchen, come on. The Montgomery kitchen at 7 a.m. was a storm system. Jean-Pierre, the head chef, commanded the line like a general, French accent slicing the air. Pans hissed, knives thocked, plates clinked. Clara stepped to the side door and tipped her chin. Close your eyes, she whispered. Now tell me the story this room is telling. He shut his eyes, feeling ridiculous, then did as told. At first it was noise. Then his mind began to sort, the steady, confident rhythm of a pro chopping. No panic in the tempo. The high, metallic clatter of a nervous assistant dropping a spoon. The bold sizzle of steak meeting pan. The anxious spit of a sauce boiling too hard. Jean-Pierre's bark, sharp, brittle, followed by the low, calm replies of a sous chef who had seen worse. A mop swish near the back door. Someone new trying not to be in the way. They respect him, Caleb said softly, eyes still shut. But they're scared of messing up. Good, Clara murmured. Who's new? That kid by the dish pit, he said, opening his eyes to find the red-faced teen he'd already heard. He's trying to move like he belongs. He doesn't. Yet. They slipped out before anyone noticed. For the first time in memory, the house felt less like a stage and more like a book with pages he hadn't turned. The hardest place was his father's office. They stood in the doorway, while afternoon light ran across awards and framed covers and handshakes with presidents. Your dad called the school, Clara said. He wants another update. Caleb's stomach tightened. It'll be bad. He'll be furious. Maybe, she said. Or maybe you're only reading the headline. She led him to a black and white photo he'd never really looked at. A skinny 20-something Harrison in front of a busted garage, holding a tangle of wires and a circuit board, eyes bright and wild. No suit, no trophies, hunger and hope. That was his first office, Clara said. She pointed to a smaller, older picture hidden on a shelf. A hard-eyed man in coveralls, next to a skinny boy clutching a report card. Young Harrison, looking up with fear and wanting. That was his dad. He made love something you earned. Caleb felt the room tilt. The awards weren't weapons anymore. They were scar tissue. The photos weren't bragging rights. They were a paper trail of a person terrified to fail because failure meant unlovable. That night, when Harrison strode past, phone in hand, Caleb heard himself say, I saw the garage photo. That must have been brutal. Harrison stopped, a flicker breaking his granite face. He studied his son for the punchline that didn't come. It was, he said, voice rougher than usual. Different times. He nodded once and kept moving. Not a breakthrough. A crack. Enough. Hook out. Caleb just learned to listen, and the next thing he hears will upend everything he thinks he knows about school, his father, and himself. When you finally see, the world stops feeling scripted and starts talking back. The bus didn't change. Same cracked seats, same diesel breath. Caleb did. Instead of hiding, he watched. A mom in scrubs with 3 kids counted wrinkled bills, lips moving with the math of rent. 2 seniors in the back laughed too loud, but their eyes never softened. The driver, a retired Marine by the haircut and the Semper Fi decal, tapped the wheel in perfect 4/4, metronoming his patience. None of them were extras in Caleb's movie anymore. They were leads in theirs. At Northwood, routine tried to reclaim him. It almost worked in first period history until Mr. Gable flashed an old photograph on the screen. Soot-faced factory workers, shoulders slumped, a boy no older than 12 staring off camera. Conditions were harsh, Gable said. Discuss. Kyle Jennings smirked. They look miserable. Should have gotten better jobs. A few laughs. The old Caleb would have smirked too. The new one felt heat in his chest and raised his hand. They couldn't, he said, surprising himself with how steady he sounded. Heads turned. Look at their hands. Thick calluses. That's a lifetime of using your body for someone else's machine. The man center left. Those shoulders aren't just tired today. They're carrying the idea that this is all he'll ever be. And the kid on the left? He's not looking at us. He's looking at the man next to him. If that's his dad, he's staring at his own future. Silence. Then the softest sound in a classroom. A teacher exhaling hope. That, Mr. Gable said, lowering his laser pointer, is analysis. The word landed like a small medal pinned to Caleb's hoodie. He started trying everywhere. In English, he stopped underlining symbols and started asking why the writer hurt the way they did. In physics, formulas stopped being threats and started being stories. Gravity as love that the universe refuses to stop giving. Momentum as stubbornness quantified. His grades twitched. An F crawled into a D. The D stood up into a C. It wasn't magic. It was sweat. Harrison noticed the tremor in the data, the way a man like him notices everything. One night, he stood behind his desk, mid-sip of black coffee, interim report in hand. So, he said, voice flat as winter, from catastrophic to merely bad. He flicked the paper like it smelled. Did you pay someone to sit your quizzes? Hire another ghost to write short answers? I'm doing the work, Caleb said, careful not to flinch. Trying is irrelevant, Harrison replied. Results are the only language the world speaks. Finals are in 3 weeks. They decide your graduation. They decide whether this little bus experiment ends. Do not fail me again. It should have crushed him. Instead, it clarified him. 3 weeks wasn't time to cram a year. It was time to connect it. He went to the only person who'd ever taught him how. He found Clara in the greenhouse, misting orchids that glowed like small moons. He doesn't believe me, Caleb said, and I've got 21 days to prove a lifetime wrong. It isn't about him, she said, eyes on a leaf as she turned it to catch the light. Weather changes. Soil stays. Make your ground solid. How? I can't memorize my way out. Then don't memorize, she said, finally meeting his eyes. Map. They took over the unused ballroom, a white box with an echo and a wall of mirrors that refused to let you lie to yourself. Susan left tea and grilled cheese on a side table like offerings. Clara rolled a portable whiteboard to center court and drew a dot. Transcontinental Railroad, she said, Start here. Why then? Civil War, Caleb said, chalking fast across his brain. The Union needed the West locked in. Move troops, move supplies, move loyalty. Bridge, politics, she said, drawing a line. How is it possible? Bessemer process made steel cheap and strong, he said, surprised at the answer in his mouth. Nitroglycerin, and then dynamite for blasting. Surveying tech improved. Bridge, science. Another line. Who built it? Immigrants. Chinese crews in the Sierra. Irish in the plains. Paid pennies, died by the hundreds. Bridge, society. Line. What did people write and sing about it? Loneliness, danger, promise, he said. Hearing dust and violin. Ballads, dime novels, Whitman-sized bragging. Bridge, literature, she said, finishing the web. Caleb stepped back, chest buzzing. He wasn't stacking facts anymore. He was building a city of meaning. They did the same with the Great Depression. Markets and margin calls, bridging to the Dust Bowl's wind and wheat. Photographs that shamed a nation, bridging to the New Deal's alphabet soup. They connected Newton to a jump shot arc in the gym. They connected Shakespearean sonnets to the golden ratio. Every night, another web bloomed on the board until the mirror showed a room threaded like a brain. On the bus, he rehearsed silently, building bridges in his head while taillights stitched the dawn. At lunch, he sat alone and drew arrows in a cheap notebook instead of scrolling. It felt less like studying and more like building a raft from scraps he'd been tripping over for years. One evening, curiosity pulled him sideways. "Why you?" he asked in the library, while Clara copied a passage from a battered book into her small notebook in a script as neat as type. She closed the book and pulled a leather journal from her backpack. Old, scuffed, edges feathered. She opened to a page and handed it over. The handwriting was tight and sure. Saw a spider web torn by wind at dawn. The spider did not mourn. It rebuilt. Nature has no pride, only purpose. Another entry. The captain tells us to hate the enemy. Through my scope, I see a boy cleaning his rifle, who could be my own. The most dangerous Wepo Caleb's throat closed. Your great-granddad wrote this. In a war? In a trench, Clara said. He said the world's broken, and the only way to fix it is to raise people who can see how things fit together again. The finals came on like weather. History first. The essay prompt. Explain the economic, social, and political causes of the Great Depression would have once turned him to stone. Now his pen moved. Stock speculation and credit culture met drought and soil science. Dorothea Lange's lens met Woody Guthrie's guitar and the machinery of Congress. He didn't recite. He braided. Physics was next. He drew triangles, but he also pictured bodies moving through space with equal parts math and mercy. English, econ, government. Each exam, a different river, feeding the same sea. Then the waiting. 7 days of summer, trying to start, while his fate sat in a server somewhere. Harrison called him into the office when the email arrived. The room felt different now. Same awards. Less gravity. Harrison slid a single sheet across the desk. Your final report? Caleb read. History, B+. English, B. Physics, B. Economics, C+. Government, B. His breath stuttered. He had done it. Not valedictorian, not even close, but upright, honest, earned. He looked up, a grin starting without permission. Harrison studied him like a counterfeit bill. This improvement is notable, his father said. So notable, it's impossible. No one jumps from a 0.8 to a 2.8 in one term. The temperature in the room dropped. Who did you pay? The grin died. The wound landed where it always had. But behind the sting, something steadier stood up. The oak, the web, the map. I did the work, Caleb said. Don't lie to me, Harrison snapped, fist touching wood. I can tolerate a fool. I will not tolerate a cheat. Caleb felt the old fear rise and pass. I don't think you're stupid, Dad, he said, voice even. I think you're blind. You read markets better than anyone alive. You forgot how to read a person. You see me as a line item, not a son. I didn't do this for you. I did it for me. He set the paper back on the desk, a gift unaccepted. Believe it or don't, that's your weather. I know my ground. He walked out, leaving Harrison alone with a new and terrible possibility that his son had changed without his permission. Hook out. Caleb just passed the test he thought mattered. Now comes the one he never saw coming. The secret that will force him to choose between the father who doubts him and the girl who taught him to see. The richest kid in Fairfield County missed his chauffeur and met his first real teacher at dawn. The bus growled up the long, tree-lined road like an insult painted yellow. Caleb stood at the end of the Montgomery driveway in a gray hoodie and beat-up sneakers he'd found in the back of his closet, pretending the morning chill bothered him more than the looks he was about to get. When the doors hissed open, 100 glances landed on him, some amused, some curious, a few openly delighted. He kept his eyes down and slid into an empty seat near the back. The vinyl was cracked. The floor smelled faintly of diesel and grape gum. It felt like sitting on the edge of the world. He tried to disappear, but the bus didn't let people vanish. A little kid in a Spider-Man backpack kept stealing glances. 2 juniors in varsity jackets whispered, then laughed too loudly. Caleb stared out the window at stone walls and tidy mailboxes blurring past, breathing slow, counting to 5 like the therapist he'd refused to see had once suggested. Northwood Prep wasn't built for secret humiliations. By lunch, the rumor had traveled faster than Wi-Fi. Yo, Montgomery! Kyle Jennings called across the cafeteria, voice bright with performative pity. How's the peasant shuttle? Laughter rippled. Caleb's jaw flexed, but he looked past Kyle like he was air. For the first time, he wondered what it would be like to answer cruelty with nothing. No joke, no mask, just a choice to keep walking. That night, the mansion felt louder in its silence. No phone, no car, no excuses. The ocean threw silver light through the great room. He drifted to the library, to the far corner where he'd once heard humming. Clara May sat cross-legged on the rug, a paperback balanced on her knee, a spray bottle and rag at her side like tools of a small, precise trade. She looked up before he spoke. Tomorrow, she said, as if they'd already made an appointment, before the sun clears the trees. For what? He asked, half defensive, half relieved someone had plans for him, to learn how to see. He almost laughed, then didn't. Okay. At first light, the estate wore a pale bluish hush. The old oak in the center lawn lifted its arms like a cathedral. Clara waited beside it in overalls and a Yankees cap, holding a clean mason jar like it mattered. Look here, she said, pointing to a patch of earth where roots pushed through damp grass. What do you see? Dirt, grass. He tried to make it sound like a joke. It came out tired. Look again, not with your answers, with your eyes. He crouched. At first, nothing. Then movement. An ant wrestling a breadcrumb 3 times its size, skirting pebbles like boulders. a spider web strung between two blades of grass, each line jeweled with dew, trembling at the slightest breath. A purple wildflower the size of a dime forcing itself through a crack of compacted soil. He pressed his palm to the cool ground and felt a dull, living thrum he couldn't name. Clara waited. "The world tells the truth," she said quietly, "but it whispers." She set the jar under a low branch. "Now close your eyes." He did. "Count what you hear." He wanted to protest. Instead, he listened. A faraway truck down on the post road, the soft pad of water slipping from leaf to leaf, a chickadee cutting the quiet, the faint scratch of a squirrel on bark. Even his own breath, too shallow. When he opened his eyes, the tree seemed bigger, not taller, truer. They moved to the kitchen during prep for a charity dinner. Jean-Pierre, the head chef, conducted pans and people like a storm system with a French accent. "Close your eyes again," Clara said over the sizzle and clang. "Don't hear noise. Hear story." He took a breath and separated the chaos. The metronome chop of a confident knife. The metallic clatter of a spoon dropped by someone new. The angry spit of oil complaining under a steak. A pot boiling too fast. Hiss, then a curse. Jean-Pierre's clipped orders. The calmer, lower, "Yes, chef" replies from the veterans. When he opened his eyes, he knew exactly which prep cook was terrified and which station would be perfect on time. Back in the library, she brought him to a framed photo he'd walked by his whole life. A skinny version of Harrison standing in front of a busted garage with a coil of wire and a circuit board. Face lit with hunger, eyes lit with purpose. "I've seen it," he muttered. "You looked," Clara said. "You didn't see." He leaned closer. The cheap sneakers, the oil stains on the concrete, the couch cushion on the floor, bed, not furniture, a calendar with 3 red X's in a row. Missed rent? Or milestones? A note scrawled in the corner. "Ship V1 Friday." The photo wasn't a trophy. It was a wound that had scarred into a lesson. "Your dad didn't wake up as your dad," Clara said, voice a thread. "He built him. When people build themselves that hard, they get afraid someone will knock it down. They forget the difference between love and proof." Something rearranged quietly inside Caleb, like furniture in a dark room finding the right place. The bus ride the next morning felt different. He didn't shrink. He watched. He saw a single mom counting bills with her thumb, then tucking a 5 into her kid's coat pocket when she thought he wasn't looking. He saw the varsity kings cracking jokes that never touched their eyes. A freshman with paint under his nails sketching sneakers on the back of a worksheet. Stories were everywhere, hiding in plain sight. In history, Mr. Gable clicked to a slide of factory workers. The old Caleb would have rolled his eyes. Instead, he raised his hand. Words came that weren't memorized. They were observed. The slouch of shoulders, carrying more than a shift. The boy at the edge, staring not at the camera, but at the man beside him. The map of calluses explaining more than a caption ever could. The room went quiet in a new way. Mr. Gable's eyebrows lifted with something like respect. That night, Harrison breezed through the hallway smelling of jet fuel and coffee. Caleb almost said nothing. Instead, "I saw your garage photo." Harrison slowed. Caleb didn't ask for money or permission. "Must have been brutal," he said. "Starting like that?" A flicker, then the old armor. "Different time," Harrison said, and moved on. But for a second, the statue had been human. Back in the garden, as dusk stitched the lawn to the sky, Clara set the mason jar on the grass. Inside, 2 fireflies blinked like secrets. "What's with the jar?" Caleb asked. Proof, she said. Not the kind your dad demands. The kind you can hold. He watched the tiny lights pulse on, off, on. Something like hope answered in his chest. Tomorrow, Clara said, standing. We start connecting what you see. To what? To everything. He looked up at the old oak, then toward the mansion's glowing windows. For the first time, both felt like parts of the same map. And somewhere, just past the tree line, a storm he couldn't see yet was already rolling in. Pride can build empires, but it also builds walls too tall for love to climb. 3 weeks after finals, the Montgomery mansion should have been humming with celebration. Harrison had closed a record-breaking acquisition in Silicon Valley. Caleb had salvaged a GPA he once thought hopeless, but silence ruled the house, the kind that hummed with words unsaid. Harrison had not congratulated his son. He hadn't even mentioned the report card again. Instead, he behaved as if Caleb's improvement were another business metric. Noted, logged, expected. One evening, over steak and Pinot Noir, in the cavernous dining room, Harrison finally spoke. Northwood's board invited me to join their strategic council, he said, slicing his fillet with surgeon-like precision. They believe my perspective could elevate their academic standards. Caleb stabbed at a roasted potato. Are they aware one of their students nearly flunked out this year? Harrison's eyes flicked up, cool as chrome. And yet he didn't. That is what matters. That is how reputations are built, not on failure avoided, but on recovery executed. It's not just recovery, Caleb said. It's change. Change is irrelevant without permanence, Harrison replied. One good quarter doesn't save a company. The knife in Caleb's hand felt heavier. I'm not a company. You're my son, Harrison said, setting his fork down. And a Montgomery. Those two facts mean you don't get to be ordinary. Caleb pushed his plate away, appetite gone. What if I don't want to be what you think a Montgomery is? Harrison's expression didn't shift, but something flickered in his eyes. A warning, or maybe a wound. Want has nothing to do with legacy. The rest of the meal passed in silence. That night, Clara found Caleb on the back steps, hoodie up, staring into the dark sweep of the lawn. Fireflies blinked lazily over the grass. He still doesn't believe you, she said, sitting beside him. He doesn't see me at all, Caleb muttered, just a reflection of himself. Clara hugged her knees. You can't control how he sees, only how you build. He looked at her, searching. How do you build when someone keeps tearing down the frame? You stop waiting for their permission to lay the next brick. It was the kind of line that would have sounded cliché from anyone else. From her, it felt carved from truth. The next morning, something shifted. Caleb decided to act instead of stew. He joined the volunteer tutoring program Mrs. Albright had once mentioned, mostly to kill time, partly to prove something to himself. The first session was chaos. Kids with too much sugar and too little patience, questions fired faster than he could answer. But then he spotted a boy in the corner, no older than 8, struggling to read a simple paragraph. Caleb sat beside him, voice soft. They sounded the words out together, letter by letter, mistake by mistake. When the boy finally read the sentence aloud, slow but complete, his face split into a grin, so pure it made Caleb's chest ache. It wasn't a grade. It wasn't a headline. It was real. By the end of the week, tutoring wasn't just a volunteer gig. It was an anchor. It was a place where effort mattered more than legacy, where failure was just part of the climb. Harrison, of course, noticed. You've been busy, he said one night, scrolling through the calendar his assistant maintained. Volunteer work, study groups, that robotics team, none of this is required. Maybe not for you, Caleb replied, but it's necessary for me. Necessary? Harrison arched an eyebrow. To what end? To figure out who I am without your money, your name, or your expectations. The words hung heavy. Harrison's jaw tightened. Be careful with that thinking. People without expectations become people without purpose. Or, Caleb said quietly, they find a purpose that's actually theirs. Harrison stared at him a moment longer, then turned back to his tablet. But for the first time, his silence wasn't dismissive. It was uncertain. A week later, as June sunlight poured over Greenwich, Caleb sat beneath the oak with Clara. She was writing in her grandfather's journal again, her handwriting small and careful. "What are you writing?" he asked. "Notes about what you're becoming," she said, without looking up. "And what's that?" She smiled faintly. "Someone who's starting to build his own map." He leaned back against the bark, letting the breeze carry the smell of cut grass. For the first time, the weight of his last name didn't feel like chains. It felt like something he could shape. And for the first time, he wondered if his father could see the boy he was becoming. Not the heir, not the investment, but the person. Would he still be disappointed? Or would he finally be proud? The answer, he knew, would change everything. When a father can't see his son, truth starts looking like betrayal. Harrison summoned Caleb to the study just before sunset. The room glowed with that museum-warm light. Mahogany, glass, framed magazine covers, a lifetime of victories. Harrison didn't stand. He simply slid a single sheet across the desk, face down. "Your final report card," he said, voice even. "Turn it over." Caleb flipped it. B+ in history, B in English, C+ in econ, B in physics. Not valedictorian material, but a resurrection all the same. His throat tightened. "I did it," he breathed, a smile tugging. "Dad, No," Harrison cut in, the word sharp as a paper edge. "You didn't." The smile stalled. "What?" "Statistically impossible." Harrison steepled his fingers. "From a 0.8 to a 2.8 in one term? Not without assistance." "You think I cheated." It came out flat, almost funny, except it wasn't. "I think you engineered an outcome," Harrison said. "It's what Montgomerys do. Usually I'd be proud." He leaned forward. Not this time. Heat flooded Caleb's chest. "I studied. I asked questions. I worked." "With who?" Harrison fired back. "Which tutor did you pay after I cut you off? Which teacher did you charm? Which file did you access? Don't insult us both." Caleb stared at him. The set jaw, the careful suit, a fortress calling itself a father. A dozen comebacks flashed and died. He heard Clara's voice instead. "Pride is a mirror. It only shows you yourself." "I didn't cheat," he said quietly. "Believe me or don't. It doesn't change what I learned." Harrison's mouth thinned. "You will always need proof, Caleb. And when I don't see it, I act." "On what?" Caleb asked. "On fear?" The word surprised even him. Something flickered in Harrison's eyes, pain or anger, it was hard to tell. "Meeting's over." He slid the report back into a folder. "We're done here." Caleb rose, heart pounding. The old panic tried to grab the wheel. He pried its fingers off. "We're not done," he said, calmer than he felt. "You just can't see it." He left without slamming the door. That felt like its own kind of victory. He found Clara on the kitchen steps, sneakers kick in the air, a paperback tucked under her arm. Susan was at the sink, finishing up. sleeves pushed to her elbows. The room smelled like lemon oil and coffee gone cold. "How'd it go?" Clara asked, reading his face. "He called me a fraud." Caleb sank onto the step beside her. "Said my grades were impossible." Clara's gaze softened. "People protect the stories they live in. Changing those stories feels like dying." "I don't know how to make him see," Caleb admitted. "You can't make anyone see," she said. "You can only put the truth where they can't trip over it without looking down." Susan dried her hands, hesitated, and turned. "Caleb, you said once, if there's ever anything I can do, anything real. Did you mean it?" "All the way," he said, sitting up. Susan exchanged a look with her daughter. Resolve settled in her shoulders. "My brother worked for your father, 20 years, loyal, quiet. When there was a breach, a huge one, they needed someone to blame fast. They blamed him. Said he sold company secrets. Harrison fired him. Blacklisted, really." Her voice thinned. "He didn't do it." Caleb's mind raced. "Did your brother have a lawyer?" "We didn't have the money for a fight," Susan said, jaw tight. "He signed what they shoved at him to stop the bleeding." Clara slid the journal from her backpack and held it, almost like a talisman. "My great-grandpa said the worst weapon in any war is the story we tell about the other side. Your dad's story is wrong. And you want me to, what? Storm the castle?" Caleb tried to smile. It didn't land. "We want you to look," Clara said simply, "with the eyes you've been training. If we're wrong, we'll live with it. But if we're right—" Caleb pictured the study's cold light, his father's certainty, the folder closing like a verdict. He pictured Susan counting tips at midnight. He pictured Clara, 11 going on ancient, holding a world together with a string of careful, stubborn truths. "Show me everything you have," he said. They cleared the breakfast nook table. Susan set down a thin manila folder. Termination letter, NDAs, a couple of old emails, a badge photo. Her brother younger, hopeful, the kind of smile you wear when you still believe work is a promise. "It's not much," Susan apologized. "It's a thread," Clara said. "Threads lead to fabric." That night, when the house finally went still and the ocean wind rattled the eucalyptus, Caleb slipped into the library. He'd watched his father log in 1,000 times over the years, a son learning ritual by osmosis. His fingers hovered above the keys. He could feel the line he was about to cross. Then he heard Clara again. "You're not breaking in to steal. You're breaking in to see." He typed. The system opened. Humming with the quiet confidence of wealth, he dove into archived security reports, incident logs, network maps, board minutes. At first, it was a blizzard of jargon and timestamp snow. He slowed down, breathed, looked for story, not noise. A pattern emerged, tiny anomalies spaced like heartbeat irregularities. File pulls after midnight under a generic admin. Mirror transfers routed through legacy servers that should have been decommissioned. A burst of encrypted traffic with a signature that didn't match Susan's brother's workstation, but overlapped with activity from a different floor entirely. He followed the breadcrumb trail through audit PDFs and asset inventories until a name brushed the edge of the page like a shadow. Jennings. Not the kid from school. His father. Kyle Jennings Sr. Board member. Acquisition hawk. Harrison's favorite sparring partner on CNBC. Caleb's pulse kicked. He traced the spikes. Each time the admin ghost touched live code, there was a corresponding calendar block on Jennings Sr.'s schedule. Client dinner, red eye, off-site. Alibis, neat as cufflinks. Caleb printed the logs. He drew lines and dates. circled handoffs, annotated acronyms until the mess became a map. At dawn, his eyes burned and his hands trembled, not from fear, but from the clarity that arrives when a picture finally snaps into focus. He slid the stack into a binder and stood. The house creaked softly, waking. Somewhere upstairs, Harrison's alarm chirped. Clara's rule echoed. Put truth where they can't walk without seeing it. Caleb took one breath, then another, and headed for the study. Cliffhanger. When he lays the binder on his father's desk, will Harrison read it? Or will he finally break the one bridge left between them? Proof can crack a wall faster than rage if the other side dares to look. Caleb didn't knock. He stepped into the study and set the thick binder on Harrison's desk like a court summons. No theatrics, no speech, just paper, heavy with timestamps and ink. Harrison glanced up, already annoyed. I have 5 minutes. You'll need 3, Caleb said. Please, just read. Harrison's eyes flicked to the cover sheet. Incident 7-143, internal breach. Then to Caleb's face, measuring. He opened the binder. Silence settled, dense as felt. The old clock on the bookcase did its patient work. Page 1. Page 2. Halfway through, Harrison stopped skimming and began reading. His posture shifted. Forward. Alert. He turned a page, then another. His finger tracing a chain of transfers like a man following tracks in snow. This log, he murmured. Who pulled this archive? It's your company, Caleb said, steady. I used your credentials. You taught me to solve problems with what I have. Harrison didn't scold him. He kept reading. The farther he went, the more his face changed. Irritation to confusion to a dawning, stubborn dread. He hit the calendar printouts. He hit the network map with the ghost admin hopping floors. He hit the name, Jennings. He sat back as if the chair had punched him. Outside, a gull screamed. The sound snapped and vanished in the glass. You're accusing a board member, he said slowly. I'm showing you a pattern, Caleb answered. The accusation is your job. Harrison closed the binder. He didn't look at his son. He stared past him into some earlier year. When he spoke, his voice was thin at the edges. 20 years. Susan's brother. I signed that termination. I told the board we'd handled it. Fast. Decisive. He swallowed. God. Caleb waited. There was nothing to add. The proof sat between them, humming like a live wire. Harrison opened the binder again. He checked the IPs, the decommission orders, the late-night pulls that shouldn't exist. He checked the overlaps with Jennings Sr.'s travel. He checked until there was nowhere left to hide. When he finally lifted his head, his eyes were wet and furious, at the man in the binder, at himself, at a system that rewarded speed over care. You found this, he said. How? I learned how to see, Caleb said. It sounded corny out loud. It was also true. Harrison exhaled, a long breaking sound. I need to verify with compliance, he said. Muscle memory, reaching for structure. He picked up the phone, then put it back down. Looked at Caleb. And I need to make something right. Start with a phone call, Caleb said. Not to a lawyer. To a person. An hour later, Susan's brother, Daniel Thompson, sat on the edge of a leather chair like a man expecting a trap. He wore his only suit. The cuffs were shiny with years. Susan stood behind him, a hand on his shoulder. Clara stood beside her mother, chin up, eyes steady. Harrison didn't use the desk as a barrier. He came around it and extended his hand like a man approaching a cliff with care. Mr. Thompson, he said, voice rough. I was wrong. Daniel blinked. The sentence hung in the air like a foreign language. Harrison pressed on. I accused you without seeing. I valued speed over truth. That ends today. He nodded to the binder on the coffee table. We have evidence pointing to the real source of the breach. We're reopening the case, publicly. And if you'll allow it, I'd like you back. Senior role, back pay, benefits restored. But that's the smallest piece. Daniel's mouth worked. No sound came. Susan's grip tightened. Clara didn't move, only her eyes softened. I don't need my job back. Daniel managed at last, voice low. I need my name back. You'll have both, Harrison said, and my apology. In writing and in person. He glanced at Caleb, then back. I can't undo what I did. But I can stand beside you while we repair what can be repaired. The room was so quiet the clock felt rude. Then Daniel stood and took the hand. His shake was brief, honest. Okay, he said. Okay. Harrison nodded once, like a verdict delivered. He turned to Susan. I'm sorry, he said simply. The words seemed to cost him something. To your family. For the years I let a lie stand because it was convenient. Susan's eyes filled. Thank you, she said. No ornament, no speech. Truth didn't need polish. Harrison looked at Clara last. You put this in front of me, he said. You and my son. Clara tilted her head. He put it in front of you, she corrected gently. I just taught him how to look. Something like a smile cracked Harrison's stone face, brief and unpracticed. He wiped at his eye with the heel of his hand and cleared his throat, business armor snapping back into place. We have work to do, he said, to the room and to himself. Board call at noon, PR at 1, legal at 2. Compliance stays late. We do this clean. He turned to Caleb. Walk with me. They stepped into the corridor. The house felt different, lighter, as if someone had opened a window in a locked room. I owe you an apology, Harrison said without preamble. I asked for proof because I was afraid to trust what I couldn't measure. That included you. Caleb's chest tightened. He nodded. It was enough. Harrison stopped at the framed photo of his younger self in front of the ruin of a garage. He touched the glass, then dropped his hand. You didn't just pass your classes, he said. You grew a spine and a mind. Those are the only things I can't buy for you. Turns out, Caleb said, a small smile crooked. You can borrow them from an 11-year-old. Harrison huffed a laugh. Quick, real. Keep borrowing, he said, and keep bringing me what I don't want to see. He started toward the study, then paused. You said I act when I don't see proof. He looked back. I'm going to act because I do. By evening, statements were drafted, calls made, the machine of accountability grinding into motion. News would break. A board titan would fall. A good man would get his name back. Caleb stood on the back lawn as the sky deepened to cobalt over the sound. Clara appeared beside him, silent as dusk. How'd it go? She asked. He read, Caleb said. He believed. He moved. Clara nodded, satisfied. The hardest part of seeing is letting the picture change. And my dad? Caleb asked, half joking, half afraid. Does he change? He just did, she said. A little. They watched the first star pierce the blue. When truth hits the front page, it doesn't knock. It kicks the door in and asks who's still standing. By 7 a.m., phones were vibrating across Fairfield County. CNBC scrolled the chyron. Tech giant reopens. 2018 breach. Board member under review. The Montgomery crest, gold and tasteful, sat beside a grainy headshot of Charles Jennings, Kyle's father, looking like he'd just bitten a lemon. Harrison's statement ran everywhere. We moved too fast. I made a grave error. Today, we correct it. At the mansion, the driveway filled with black SUVs and nervous men in navy suits. PR took the sunroom. Legal grabbed the dining table. Compliance camped in the library under the silent judgment of leather-bound books. Caleb stood at the edge of the storm with a mug of coffee he didn't really drink, watching the machine whirl to life. "Stay," Harrison told him, already tying on his armor. "You brought this to me. You'll see it through." Daniel Thompson arrived in a borrowed sedan and a thrift store tie. He shook Harrison's hand, then the general counsel's, then sat with the posture of a man who taught himself never to take up space. A court reporter set up. Cameras weren't allowed. Truth didn't need a ring light. "First," Harrison said, voice steady, "on the record, we apologize to Mr. Daniel Thompson for the harm caused by our wrongful termination and public statements in 2018. Click-clack from the stenographer. Words that would live in ink. Harrison turned to Daniel. "I can offer compensation, a position, but none of it returns time. If you want a public town hall, I'll stand beside you." Daniel's mouth trembled once. "Let's fix the record," he said. "The rest will follow." At noon, the board met over a video wall. 12 faces, 12 stakes, and a reputation. Jennings joined late, jaw tight, his background a tasteful study with a too-perfect flag. "This is outrageous," he snapped. "To smear a director on ancient logs and speculative flows? Harrison, you're letting personal—" "Stop," Harrison said, flat. He gestured to compliance. Screens lit with maps, timestamps, two-factor traces. "We'll let the evidence talk." Evidence talked like a choir. Jennings tried to overrun it with volume, then with legalese, then with wounded dignity. The more he spoke, the smaller he felt. When the chair finally asked, "Director Jennings, did you access systems outside your authorization?" his feed glitched, stalled, and cut. He didn't come back. "Motion to suspend," the chair said quietly. Votes ticked like a metronome. Unanimous. Harrison killed his camera and let his forehead rest in his hand for one raw second. Then he stood straighter and faced Daniel. "You're cleared," he said, "publicly now." The press conference was small and plain by design. No banners, no gala stage, just a podium on the front steps, ocean wind working at the microphones. Harrison spoke first, crisp and unadorned. He said the words executives almost never say. "I was wrong." He said, "I'm sorry." He said, "We are accountable." Behind him, Daniel stood in his shiny cuff suit, eyes bright. Reporters asked him if forgiveness was possible. He said, "Accountability first, forgiveness takes time." It was the strongest sentence of the day. Back inside, the house exhaled. PR packed their pelicans. Legal shut laptops with the weary satisfaction of surgeons after a hard save. Harrison found Caleb near the window, where the sound flashed steel blue. "You did good," Harrison said, still awkward with praise, but meaning it. "Better than good. I'd like you, if you're willing, to come in this summer. Not as a mascot, as a junior analyst. You've got a nose for patterns." Caleb's heart did a dumb little kick. The old him would have said yes for the badge alone. The new him pictured fluorescent floors. Danielle in QA, who brought donuts. The guy on night ops, who hummed Springsteen. All the invisible gears. He wanted to learn how the whole clock ticked. "Okay," he said, "but I'm still taking the bus to school." A laugh escaped Harrison, surprised and real. "Fine, take the bus, just don't be late." "At Northwood." "No, At the public high school 3 miles inland where he'd transferred for the last stretch, whispers moved faster than homeroom. By lunch, everyone had seen the clip. Kyle found Caleb by the vending machines. "You think you won?" Kyle said. "Too close, breath hot with cheap energy drink. You blew up my family." "No," Caleb answered evenly. "Your dad blew up your family. I just turned on the lights." Kyle's fist twitched. 2 teachers watched from the hall. For a split second, Caleb saw the boy, not the bully, the scared kid hearing shouts through a closed home office. He stepped back, palms open. "This part sucks," he said softly. "I get it." Kyle flinched at the empathy like it burned. He didn't swing. He just spat a curse and shouldered away, smaller than yesterday. On the late bus, Clara slid into the seat across the aisle, feet tucked under like a cat. She'd watched the press conference on her mom's phone from the library parking lot. "Pretty good for a Thursday," she said. "Top 5 Thursdays," Caleb said. "How'd I do?" "You did the boring brave thing," she said. "The kind that holds." Out the window, strip malls gave way to marsh reeds glowing copper. Caleb let the rhythm of the bus settle into his bones. He felt emptied out and rebuilt, the way the shoreline looks different after you've waded in it yourself. At home, Susan met Daniel in the foyer with a hug that lasted a whole minute. Clara placed the old leather notebook, her great-grandfather's, on the entry table, as if returning a relic to a room that had learned some humility. That night, with the house finally quiet, Harrison knocked on Caleb's door. Not barged, knocked. "Come in," Caleb said. Harrison hovered, then sat. "One more thing," he said. "Tomorrow's the shareholder meeting in the city. It'll be a fight. I want you there." Caleb blinked. "Why me?" "Because I can explain the numbers," Harrison said. "You can explain the why. Shareholders don't bring pitchforks. They bring proxies. And today, someone's counting yours." The Midtown marquee reads, "Montgomery Systems, Annual Meeting." Inside, a chandeliered room hums with hedge fund haircuts, retirees clutching dividend statements, and fund managers who can move mountains with a thumb on an app. A discreet buzz says an activist group wants Harrison's head for governance failures. Blood in the water, served with croissants. Harrison adjusts the mic. "We'll get to projections," he says, voice even. "But we start with accountability." He doesn't dwell. He hits facts like mile markers. The reopened 2018 breach. Daniel Thompson's exoneration. Director Jennings suspended pending investigation. Outside audit engaged. Cyber budget doubled. Whistleblower protections fortified. Slide after slide. Metrics, timelines, controls. When the chair opens the floor, an investor in a crisp navy suit pounces. "Michael Lacey, Ridgepoint Capital. We applaud transparency, but leadership failed. Why should this CEO remain?" Harrison doesn't flinch. Because leadership also corrected, quickly, in full view. And because continuity matters when you're rebuilding a plane in the air. A retiree with a floral scarf stands, voice tremoring. "I held your stock through the dot-com crash. I want to trust you. Convince me." Harrison looks to his right. "Caleb," he says, surprising the room, and maybe himself. "You take this." Every head swivels. Caleb steps up, not in a tailored suit, but in a clean button-down and the steadiness of someone who's earned his breath. He palms the podium like a lifeguard touching cool rail. "My name's Caleb Montgomery," he says, letting the last name land and then get out of the way. "I can't explain enterprise risk better than the team you just heard, but I can tell you why any of this should matter to you beyond the chart lines." He tells it plain. A wrongful firing, a reopened case, a man's name given back, not as a son burnishing a brand, but as a witness to what accountability looks like when it costs something. He holds up a battered leather notebook, the great-grandfather's journal Clara entrusted to him last night. This isn't company property, he says. It's a reminder. It says you cannot fix a broken system by hiding its cracks. You fix it by letting light in, even when the light hurts. A hand shoots up. Sharp suit, sharper tone. Evan Cho, Parallax Partners. If fairness is the new theme, explain this. Why is the CEO's kid on stage? Nepotism in real time. Caleb nods. Fair question. I'm here because I asked to be. Not for a corner office. Harrison offered me a junior analyst rotation. I countered with night shift in the SOC. A ripple of chuckles. He leans in. And I told him to put it through HR like anyone else. If they say I'm unqualified, I'll pour coffee for the people who are. My name doesn't get me past the firewall. The floral scarf retiree smiles, just a little. The room loosens. Another mic. Janice Ruiz, Teacher's Pension Fund. What changes outlast this news cycle? Harrison returns beside his son. Two voices now. One policy. An independent ethics council with community seats. A standing restitution fund for employees harmed by corporate error. Quarterly town halls open to small holders, not just the institutions. Cyber apprenticeships prioritizing public school grads. The slides stop. The talking doesn't. It's not spin. It's scaffolding. The chair clears her throat. We proceed to the advisory vote on leadership confidence. Ballot scan. Phones tap. A minute stretches into a mile. Caleb feels the weight of every second. Clara's steady eyes in his mind. Daniel's shaky hands yesterday. The buses hum like a heartbeat in his bones. Results flash on screen. Confidence maintained, 58.4%. A narrow ridge, but solid rock all the same. A murmur, then applause, ragged at first, then clean. Some faces pinch. A few storm out, texting furiously. Enough stay to clap. Afterward, in a side corridor that smells like lemons and brass polish, Harrison exhales for the first time all day. You saved my job, he says. Caleb shakes his head. You saved your job by telling the truth. I just translated. A reporter intercepts them for a quick comment. Harrison gives the line. Trust is a currency you earn daily. Caleb adds, we'll be back tomorrow to earn more. The reporter blinks. Nice pull quote, and peels away. On the sidewalk, March wind whips ties sideways. Daniel texts a photo. His new badge. His name spelled right. Susan replies with a string of grateful emojis she'd never used before. Clara sends just 6 words. Peon a la ocho. Jaque en tres. Pawn to the 8th. Check in 3. He laughs out loud. She saw the whole board before he even sat. They're almost to the car when someone steps from the shadow of a marble pillar. Kyle. Eyes bruised by sleep, chin up like a dare. My dad lawyered up, he says, voice hoarse. He says this was a witch hunt. He says he's coming for you. I'm sorry, Caleb says, and means it. Kyle studies him, confusion warring with anger. Then he shoves an envelope into Caleb's hand. He told me to drop this on a friendly blog. I didn't. You should see it first. Caleb looks down. The flap is unsealed. Inside, glimpses of invoices, a photo of a warehouse, a logo he doesn't recognize. He and Harrison slide into the back seat. The driver eases into midtown traffic. Caleb breaks the seal. Invoices, threat intelligence retainers, data lake cleansing, paid by Montgomery Systems to harbor Aegis for work no one in IT has heard of. Attached, a grainy photo of a warehouse by the Pulaski Skyway in Newark, a loading dock door stenciled with the same lighthouse. Harrison scans the pages, jaw tightening. This didn't route through procurement. Caleb texts a photo to Daniel Thompson. You seen this vendor? A bubble pulses, then Daniel. Ghost. Never approved. Meet? They don't go to a boardroom. They go to Luna's Diner off Route 1, the kind of place with bottomless coffee and chrome edges that catch every tired face. Daniel's in a knit sweater and badge on a lanyard, the look of a man sober on purpose. Susan and Clara slide into the booth too. This is family business now. A waitress calls everyone Han and sets down pancakes you can fold like a quilt. Daniel taps the invoice. These PO numbers point to a shadow ledger. Someone built a side road off our accounting freeway. Who could? Harrison asks. Someone with keys to both doors, Daniel says. Finance and InfoSec. Or someone who compromised one and rented the other. Caleb spreads the papers like cards. Warehouse. Tonight? Harrison hesitates. He's a CEO, not a vigilante, but nods once. We go legal after we know what we're holding. Clara flips the Harbor Aegis logo and sketches a little chessboard in the margin. Lighthouses don't move, she murmurs. So why pick one as a front? Because it makes sailors feel safe while you shift the rocks underneath. Night slips over Newark like a hood. The skyline recedes to a row of teeth. The skyway arteries thrum with semis. They park 2 blocks away and walk. Wind slicing off the Passaic. Puddles shining like spilled ink. The warehouse sits squat behind razor wire and a tired American flag that never learned to rest. Daniel points to a side door with a keypad. No cameras there. Maintenance entrance. Harrison fishes something from his pocket. He still carries a universal contractor key card from the company's build-out days. Superstition or contingency? Caleb tries it. Red light. He glances at Clara. She tilts her head, listening. Again, she whispers. He swipes slower. Green. A soft click like a held breath. Inside, the cold smell of cardboard and dust. Fluorescents flicker awake in strips. Rows of racks not with parts but servers. Bare bones blades, humming low, cabled into cheap switches. A stack of brand new laptops still in shrink. On a folding table, a thermal label printer, rolls of stickers, a coffee cup with a lipstick ring. Daniel moves like he's diffusing something. He plugs a hardware key into a switch. Air-gapped, but sloppily. His screen blossoms with device names. They're mirroring our traffic and laundering it. Spoofed billing back to Aegis. Someone built a data siphon. Caleb's stomach drops. PII? Not just that. Daniel's face drains. Prototype repos. Vendor contracts. R&D roadmaps. This is corporate marrow. Harrison grips the edge of the table. We shut it down. Now. Clara's voice threads through the hum. If you rip it out tonight, you save your secrets, but you warn the thief. Which buys them time to torch evidence upstream, Daniel says, catching on. We need provenance. Who leased this place? Who paid the utilities? Where does the money loop? We don't cut the hydra. We map every neck. Footsteps. Soft, then sure. A door at the far end opens. A rectangle of night frames 2 silhouettes. One is broad, wearing a pea coat. The other is lean, a scarf up to his nose. Stay, Harrison whispers, stepping forward before anyone can stop him. He's done hiding. The broad one flips on a work light. White glare washes the room. He freezes, then smiles like a man who always lands on his feet. Evening, Harrison, he says. Smooth. Familiar. Caleb's heart kicks. The face resolves beneath the light. The CFO, Whitman Hale, the numbers whisperer who prides himself on clean books and clean hands. Beside him, scarf lowered, is Kyle's father, Jennings Sr., eyes colder than the concrete underfoot. Whitman spreads his hands. You shouldn't be here. But since you are, we can discuss terms. Harrison's voice is iron. There are no terms. Jennings Sr. tilts his head. There are always terms. For instance, your board seats, your next quarter's guidance, your name. Clara steps half a pace forward, almost imperceptible, and taps the Harbor Aegis logo on the invoice in Caleb's hand. Her voice is barely louder than the server hum. 2 kings in 1 file. That never lasts. When the villain shows you your father's name, he's not proving you wrong. He's telling you where the trap began. Harrison doesn't flinch. That authorization was for breach containment, he says, low. Quarantines, triage, not a shadow data siphon. Whitman's smile is winter thin. Intent is a poem. Paper is law. Clara angles closer, eyes scanning the line like a jeweler. Ink density changes on the date, she murmurs. Printer banding shifts between the header and signature block. The signature's real. The terms around it moved later. Jennings Sr. shrugs. Revisions? Board approved. Board never saw Harbor Aegis, Harrison snaps. Exactly, Whitman says, gentle as a scalpel. You created an off-books lane in a panic, Harrison. We simply paved it. Cleaned messy problems. Monetized the waste stream. Everyone wins. Daniel? Caleb asks. Daniel has the folder already, running a thumb along the margin, then holds it to the fluorescence at an angle. Different toner batches. The scope of work page isn't the same print as the signed page. They Frankensteined your consent. Whitman's eyes flick to Jennings. A tiny tick. Allegations, he says. Evidence, Daniel counters, plugging his hardware key into a switch again. And your warehouse logs are about to be mirrored to 3 immutable buckets in 3 jurisdictions. Jennings steps forward, voice silk over rebar. You don't want a war, Daniel. I already had one, Daniel says, steady. You started it when you took my name. Harrison squares to Whitman. Shut it down, tonight. Then you call the audit chair, and we walk this in together. You cooperate, you survive with a job outside my company. You stonewall, you're done. So is he. He nods at Jennings. And I make sure the AG knows which family tried to kneecap a competitor. Whitman's mask fractures. Just a hairline. You can't prove I knew. Clara taps the Harbor Aegis lighthouse. You showed up in person. Silence blooms, taut as wire. Then a soft click. Not from anyone's hands. From overhead. Caleb's eyes go up. A red LED at the far camera blinks alive. Silent alarm, Jennings says, almost regretful. This facility has friends. Daniel leans into the switch. 15 minutes, maybe less. Then we buy 10, Harrison says. He turns to Whitman. Make the call. Whitman hesitates. Jennings murmurs, don't. Clara steps between the adults like a metronome, slowing a frantic song. Everyone here is playing the same 2 move, threaten and deny, she says, voice clear but soft. That's how you lose queens. We need a fork. Caleb gets it first. 2 pressures, 1 move. If he doesn't shut this down, we publish the forged contract and the siphon. His name burns. If he does shut it down, he admits control. His name burns. He meets Whitman's eyes. Pick your fire. Whitman exhales, a man counting bridges. He takes out his phone, thumbs a contact. Deactivate Newark node. Now, he says into the mic, and archive every change log to the Montgomery audit vault. He hangs up, looks at Harrison. I prefer living to winning. Rack by rack, the server hum ebbs to a lower purr. On Daniel's screen, green lights cool to amber. He's already scraping admin histories, tracing leases, grabbing utility records. Follow the money, follow the fiber, he mutters. There you are. Jennings' jaw pulses. You're making a mistake. Wit. Whitman's voice goes flat. I'm making sure I see my grandkids. Outside, tires hiss. A second set, faster. Headlights bleed through the high windows. Caleb's heart spikes. Private security? Cops? Both? Harrison moves, crisp. We're not dragged out in cuffs in a place I pay for. Daniel, you've got the mirror? Triple, Daniel says. Warrant-proofed, time-stamped. Clara, Harrison says, surprising himself. What am I not seeing? She points to the label printer. It's not just a data laundromat. They ship hardware. That's why the lighthouse, safe harbor. Some of your secrets are already at sea. Whitman nods once. 3 destinations. 1 domestic, 2 offshore. But the manifests are in the system he just captured. He jerks his chin toward Daniel. You can intercept one if you move now. Sirens thread the night, distant, then nearer. Jennings lifts his hands, palms out. This is where we all claim misunderstanding and call our lawyers. Harrison takes the folder, tucks it under his arm. This is where you walk out with us and repeat everything you just did into an attorney general's recorder. Jennings laughs without joy. You won't make it to the car. Climax turns. The roll-up door at the far end shudders, jerks, then starts to rise. Boots, flashlights. A barked command. Police! Hands where we can see them. Clara doesn't startle. She's staring at the keypad by the side door, lips moving as if counting beats. 4 seconds between swipes earlier, she whispers. The door delay is 3. The camera buffer is 5. Caleb leans in. Translate? She looks up at him, eyes bright with the terrible calm of people who've practiced fear. We have 4 to get out clean, 3 to choose a story, and 5 before their footage writes over the last 30 minutes. Daniel's fingers fly, dropping a beacon file into the switch with a line that reads, Harbor Aegis Newark. Custody transfer initiated. Montgomery Systems. Plus State AG. A legal tripwire. Harrison turns to Whitman. Last chance. Whitman lifts his chin. I'll walk. Jennings's mouth thins. He steps backward into the shadow of the roll-up, disappearing behind a shield of uniforms. Sometimes the only way out of the trap is to walk straight through it, eyes open, hands up, and receipts in your pocket. Harrison speaks first, voice steady. Officer, that folder contains evidence of an ongoing corporate crime. Chain of custody is already flagged to the state attorney general. He nods to Daniel. Daniel taps his phone. The legal tripwire he planted pings the precinct server. The body cam HUDs flash a tiny banner. AG hold. Do not destroy, sir, alter. The lead officer's jaw works. He reads the alert on his shoulder cam, then lowers the brightness on his flashlight. Sir, we're detaining everyone until we sort jurisdiction. Hands visible. Folder stays with you. No sudden moves. Behind the line of badges, Jennings Sr. tries to melt into the warehouse's shadow. Clara's gaze snags him like Velcro. That man, she says, calm as a lab report. Blue cashmere, silver tie, no badge. He gave orders before you came in. The officer swivels. Sir, step forward. Jennings hesitates. Whitman exhales, lifts a finger. He's the one who hired us off ledger. He ran Harbor Aegis like a second spine. The room tilts. A king rats out a king to save his own heartbeat. Clara counts under her breath. 1 Mississippi. 2. Then touches Caleb's elbow. 5 minutes to lock that footage, she whispers. Daniel's already mirroring the body cam stream to the same cold bucket. Belt and suspenders truth. They stand still as the officer radios the AG's on-call team. In those stretched heartbeats, Caleb notices ridiculous things. How the concrete smells like rain. How the server lights look less like stars now that some have gone dark. How Harrison's fingers, white on the folder, relax the second he says, "My son," out loud to the cop. "Officer," Harrison adds, "my son discovered the fraud. He's the complainant." The cop's eyes flick to Caleb. No scoff. Just a nod. Understood. Climax. Red and blue washes the rafters. 2 AG investigators step in with quiet authority that eats a room. They take statements. Whitman folds. Jennings snarls. The forged contract, the fiber leases, the shipping manifests, all logged, tagged, bagged. When they lead Jennings past, he tries for a last, weary jab. "Enjoy the bus, Montgomery." Caleb almost laughs. It's cheaper than bail. Hours later, dawn loosens the sky over the Long Island Sound. The 4 of them, Harrison, Caleb, Daniel, Clara, sit in a cheap diner off Route 1. Bell over the door, syrup sticking to the menus. A waitress tops off their coffee with the grace of someone who's seen the whole world by 6 a.m. Harrison clears his throat. He looks less like a statue and more like a man who took off a too heavy coat. "Daniel," he says, "I cannot give you the years back, but I can give you the title you earned and the apology I should have made day 1. Daniel nods once. It lands. "Susan's brother?" Caleb asks. "Already called," Harrison says. "We go public. Full exoneration, restitution, his choice of team to lead." "And Clara?" He turns to her softer. "I owe you more than money can count. I can't buy your wisdom, but I can fund its roots. Scholarship. Any school, any field, and a community lab in your name where kids learn to see." Clara stares at the tabletop, overwhelmed, a child and an elder in the same blink. "My mom likes the library on Maple," she says. "Maybe fix the roof first." Harrison's laugh is small and real. "We'll start with the roof." Reporters swarm the story by lunch. The press conference hurts, but it heals. Harrison takes the mic, names his failure before anyone can weaponize it, and gives the credit away. He doesn't sound like a CEO. He sounds like a father who found a better metric. Caleb doesn't return to Northwood Prep. He walks into the public high school 2 towns over with a backpack that squeaks and a face that doesn't need a mask. On the first day, he rides the bus on purpose, slides into the cracked vinyl, watches a sophomore share earbuds with his kid sister. He takes notes in history, not to pass, but to connect. He asks Mr. Gable, now adjuncting nights, to guest lecture for free pizza. The classroom fills. At home, the mansion breathes different. The library is used. The armors in the hall get dusted, not because of a schedule, but because Clara notices how the light halos them at 4 p.m. Daniel comes by sometimes with his niece, who beats Caleb at chess with the same peon trick Clara pulled months ago. Susan supervises a crew repairing the Maple Library roof. The tar smell becomes a neighborhood perfume of second chances. One evening, Harrison stands at the end of the long drive under a sky the color of steel. A bus chuffs up. He's in a wool coat, no entourage, hands shoved into pockets like a boy about to ask forgiveness. The doors sigh. He steps on, nods to the driver, and pays $3 cash. Caleb looks up, startled. Harrison sits beside him, eyes on the window, then turns just enough. You were right, he says. I learned to read balances. I never learned to read people. I'd like to start with you. Caleb swallows. Okay, he says, and it's the biggest word he's ever said. The bus rolls. Trees blur. A girl in front laughs at a meme. Somewhere a roof doesn't leak anymore. In the aisle, Clara stands, backpack hugged to her chest, and gives Caleb a small salute like the opening of a secret door.